What are you doing here? This park's for families.
I'm reading. It's a public park.
You've been here too long. Show me ID now.
Too long? I've been here 20 minutes. I'm a veteran.
I don't care. Stand up. You're being arrested for loitering.
Arrested for reading a book? In a public park?
Are you serious?
What are you doing here? This park's for families. Robert Johnson looked up from his book, squinting against the afternoon sun. A police officer stood over him, arms crossed, blocking the light. Robert closed his copy of Band of Brothers and set it carefully on the bench beside him. "I'm reading," he said evenly. "It's a public park." Officer Justin Parker shifted his weight, hand resting on his belt. "You've been here too long. Show me ID now." Robert's expression didn't change. 22 years in the Army had taught him how to remain calm when someone was looking for a fight. "Too long? I've been here 20 minutes. I'm a veteran. I work right across the street at the high school. This is my lunch break." "I don't care," Parker said, his voice rising. "Stand up. You're being arrested for loitering." Robert stood slowly, his military bearing evident in the controlled movement. "Arrested for reading a book? In a public park? Are you serious right now?" It was 2:15 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon in Lincoln Park, a small neighborhood park with 6 benches, a playground, and a walking path that circled a duck pond. The sun was warm but not hot. Children played on the swings while their mothers chatted nearby. An elderly couple fed breadcrumbs to the ducks. A woman in yoga pants walked a golden retriever along the path, earbuds in, lost in her own world until she heard the officer's raised voice and stopped, pulling out one earbud to listen. Have you ever been treated like a suspect for doing absolutely nothing wrong? Type yes or no in the comments. Robert kept his hands visible, away from his body. "Officer, I sit on this bench every Tuesday during my lunch break. I'm a JROTC instructor at Lincoln High. The school is 2 blocks that way." He gestured with his chin, not his hands. "I've been here 20 minutes. I'll be heading back to work in 10 minutes. I'm not loitering. I'm taking my lunch break in a public park." "I decide what's loitering," Parker said. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." "Officer, what is your name and badge number?" Parker's jaw tightened. "Turn around now." Robert remained still, his voice steady and calm. "I'm entitled to know your name and badge number before you detain me. I'm also entitled to know what specific ordinance you believe I'm violating." The woman with the golden retriever had stopped walking. She stood 15 feet away on the path, phone in her hand now, no longer hidden in her pocket. She held it up, camera pointed at the scene, recording. "I'm not asking again," Parker said. "I'm not refusing to comply," Robert said, his tone unchanged. "I'm asking you to identify yourself and explain the legal basis for this detention." "That's my right." Parker grabbed Robert's wrist and yanked it behind his back. Robert didn't resist, but he didn't help either. His body remained relaxed, compliant but not cooperative. Parker pulled the other arm back roughly, and the metallic click of handcuffs closing around Robert's wrist seemed obscenely loud in the quiet park. "This is being recorded," Robert said clearly, projecting his voice without shouting. "Ma'am with the phone, are you getting all of this?" "Every second," the woman called back, her voice shaking slightly. "I've been watching the whole thing. He wasn't doing anything." 2 mothers from the playground had noticed the commotion and were walking closer, phones emerging from purses. One of them spoke to the other, but her voice carried across the grass. "What's happening? Why are they arresting that man?" "He was just sitting there reading," the dog walker said, still recording. "I walk past this park every day. I've seen him on that bench before. He's always reading." Parker's face flushed. "All of you need to back up. This is police business." "This is a public park," the dog walker said. "I'm allowed to stand here. And I'm allowed to record police activity in public. That's my First Amendment right." What Officer Justin Parker didn't know, what he couldn't have known as he forced Robert Johnson's hands into steel cuffs and began reading him Miranda rights in a public park at 2:15 on a Tuesday afternoon, was that the man he was arresting had spent 22 years defending those exact constitutional rights. Robert Johnson wasn't just a veteran. He was a decorated combat veteran who had served in the Gulf War and completed 2 tours in Afghanistan. He held a Bronze Star for Valor, awarded after he carried 3 wounded soldiers out of a firefight in Kandahar province under direct enemy fire. He held a Purple Heart, earned when shrapnel from an IED tore through his left leg, severing nerves and ending his active combat career. He had risen to the rank of Sergeant First Class before accepting a medical retirement, and he had spent the last 7 years teaching leadership, discipline, and citizenship to high school students in the Junior Reserve Officers Training Corps program. He sat on this exact bench every single Tuesday, weather permitting, for exactly 30 minutes during his lunch break. The park maintenance supervisor knew him by name. The crossing guard at the elementary school 2 blocks away waved to him when she saw him. He had never received so much as a parking ticket in his entire life. And now he was being arrested for reading a book. If you believe in holding authority figures accountable when they abuse their power, hit that subscribe button. This story gets even more intense. Parker guided Robert toward the patrol car parked at the curb, one hand on Robert's cuffed wrists, the other on his upper arm. Robert walked steadily, his gait slightly uneven from the old injury to his leg. "Officer, I'm asking you again for your name and badge number," Robert said as they reached the car. "Parker. Badge 447. Satisfied?" "No," Robert said calmly. "I'm not satisfied. I'm a United States Army veteran with 22 years of service. I have a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart. I'm a JROTC instructor at the high school 2 blocks from here. I sit in this park every Tuesday during my lunch break. I have done nothing illegal. I have violated no ordinance. I have not been loitering. I have been sitting peacefully in a public park, reading a book, for 20 minutes. Parker opened the back door of the patrol car. "Get in." "I'm not resisting," Robert said, "but I want it on record that I am asking for your supervisor. I'm asking for your commanding officer to be called to this scene immediately." "You can ask for whatever you want at the station," Parker said, pushing down on Robert's head as he guided him into the back seat. The interior smelled of industrial cleaner and stale sweat. The plastic seat was hard and molded, designed to be hosed down, not comfortable. Robert settled into it, his cuffed hands awkward behind him, putting pressure on his shoulders. Through the window, Robert could see the dog walker still recording. One of the mothers from the playground was on her phone, speaking urgently. The other mother had walked closer to the patrol car, her face a mixture of confusion and anger. Parker slid into the driver's seat and picked up his radio. "Unit 447 to dispatch. I have a 10 to 15 in custody, 1 adult male, transporting to station for processing." The radio crackled back. "Copy that, 447. What's the charge?" "Loitering in Lincoln Park." There was a pause. "Loitering? Can you clarify?" Subject was sitting on a bench for an extended period without clear purpose. Refused to provide satisfactory explanation. Another pause, longer this time. 447, is the subject being disorderly? Negative. Is the subject intoxicated or creating a disturbance? Negative. Then what's the basis for the arrest? Parker's jaw worked. He was loitering, dispatch. I'm transporting. 447 out. He hung up the radio receiver harder than necessary. Do you think the officer should have just apologized and walked away at this point? Let me know below. Robert spoke from the back seat, his voice carrying the same calm authority it did when he addressed a classroom full of teenagers. "Officer Parker, I teach constitutional law as part of my JROTC curriculum. I teach my students about the Fourth Amendment, which protects citizens against unreasonable searches and seizures. I teach them about the 14th Amendment, which guarantees equal protection under the law. I teach them that when they see injustice, they have a duty to speak up. Right now, you are providing me with a perfect teaching example of what not to do." Parker said nothing. He started the engine. "I also teach them about documentation," Robert continued. "I teach them that in situations like this, witnesses matter. Evidence matters. That woman with the golden retriever has been recording this entire encounter from the moment you approached me. I estimate she has approximately 8 to 10 minutes of video showing me sitting peacefully on a bench, reading a book, and you approaching me without cause, refusing to identify yourself initially, refusing to explain the legal basis for detention, and arresting me despite my clear and calm explanation. Parker pulled away from the curb. My school ID is in my wallet, Robert said. My veteran's ID is in there too. My driver's license shows my address, which is 4 miles from this park, in case you're wondering if I'm homeless or vagrant, which appears to be your assumption. You could have asked to see those IDs. You could have verified my story in 60 seconds. Instead, you escalated to arrest. I'm curious why. Silence from the front seat. I'm also curious, Robert continued, his tone still measured and calm, why you told me this park is for families when I am a member of this community, a taxpayer, and a public servant who works with the city's children every single day. What about my presence in that park suggested I wasn't part of a family? What about me sitting quietly, reading a book, suggested I was a threat to anyone? Parker's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. You're not going to answer that question, are you? Robert said. It wasn't really a question. They drove in silence for 3 minutes. Robert watched the familiar streets roll past, the coffee shop where he sometimes grabbed a cup before school, the hardware store where he'd bought paint last summer, the barber shop where he'd gotten his hair cut every 3 weeks for the past 7 years. His city. His community. And he was riding through it in handcuffs in the back of a police car because he'd been sitting in a park. At the station, Parker pulled into the secure lot and parked. He opened Robert's door and helped him out, less roughly this time but still silent. They walked through the back entrance, past 2 other officers who glanced over with mild curiosity but said nothing. Parker guided Robert to a processing desk where a tired-looking sergeant with gray hair looked up from paperwork. "Whatcha got, Parker?" "Loitering arrest. Lincoln Park." The desk sergeant's eyebrows rose slightly. "Loitering? What was he doing?" "Sitting on a bench. Refusing to leave when asked." "Did you ask him to leave?" Parker hesitated. "I asked him what he was doing there." "And what did he say?" "He said he was reading." The desk sergeant looked at Robert, then back at Parker. "Reading. He'd been there too long." "How long?" "At least 20, 30 minutes. "And that's illegal now?" The desk sergeant's tone had shifted, skepticism creeping in. "What would you have done in this situation? Drop your answer in the comments." Robert spoke up, his voice respectful but firm. "Sergeant, my name is Robert Johnson. I'm a Sergeant First Class, United States Army, retired. I'm also a JROTC instructor at Lincoln High School. I was sitting in Lincoln Park during my lunch break, reading a book, as I do every Tuesday. Officer Parker approached me, refused to accept my explanation, refused to verify my employment or identity, and arrested me despite multiple witnesses and video documentation showing I was doing nothing illegal." The desk sergeant's expression changed. He looked at Parker with something that might have been recognition or might have been concern. "Did you verify any of that?" "He didn't give me time to." "Did you ask for his ID?" He was being uncooperative. "Did you ask for his ID?" the desk sergeant repeated, his voice hardening. Parker said nothing. The desk sergeant sighed and picked up his phone. "I need Lieutenant Marsh down here. Now." 2 minutes later, a woman in uniform came through the door marked Administration. She was in her mid-40s, wearing lieutenant's bars, and her expression was all business. She looked at Parker, then at Robert in handcuffs, then back at Parker. "Tell me this isn't what I think it is," she said. Parker started to speak, but the desk sergeant cut him off. "Parker arrested this man for loitering in Lincoln Park. Subject claims he's a retired Army Sergeant First Class and a JROTC instructor at Lincoln High. Says he was reading a book during his lunch break. Says there are multiple witnesses and video." Lieutenant Marsh's face went very still. "Reading a book?" "Yes, ma'am," Robert said. "Stephen Ambrose's Band of Brothers. It's still on the bench unless someone picked it up." She closed her eyes briefly, and when she opened them, she was looking at Parker with an expression that would have frozen water. "Get those cuffs off him. Right now." Parker fumbled with his keys. The handcuffs came off, and Robert brought his hands forward, rubbing his wrists. Red marks circled them where the metal had pressed into skin. "Mr. Johnson," Lieutenant Marsh said, her voice completely different now, "I apologize. This should never have happened. Can I get you some water? Do you need medical attention?" I'm fine, Robert said. But I do want to file a formal complaint. Absolutely. And I want you to know that this incident will be investigated thoroughly. Parker, you are on administrative leave effective immediately. Gun and badge. Now. Parker's face had gone from red to pale. Lieutenant, I was just. Gun. And. Badge. Now. He complied, hands shaking slightly as he unclipped his badge and unholstered his service weapon. He set them on the desk sergeant's counter. Wait in my office, Marsh said. Don't speak to anyone. Don't touch anything. Just wait. Parker walked away, his footsteps echoing in the hallway. Marsh turned back to Robert. Mr. Johnson, I need to tell you something. You're not the first person Parker has arrested in that park. You're not even the first person this month. But you might be the first person with the resources and the knowledge to do something about it. Robert looked at her steadily. How many others? I'll be transparent with you because you deserve that much. Parker has 9 prior complaints filed against him. 7 of those complaints come from black men who were approached in parks, parking lots, or other public spaces where they had every legal right to be. He has used loitering charges at a rate 5.2 times higher against black individuals compared to white individuals. We've tried to address it through retraining. We've tried counseling. We've tried supervision. And clearly, none of that worked. Why wasn't he terminated? Union protection. Lack of definitive proof in previous cases. No video evidence clear enough to override his word. But now, she gestured toward the door. Now we have a decorated combat veteran arrested for reading a book in broad daylight in a public park, with multiple witnesses and video documentation. Now we have something we can act on. Robert nodded slowly. I want copies of all 9 complaints. I want the personnel file. I want every piece of documentation related to Officer Parker's pattern of behavior. And I want to speak with a civil rights attorney. You'll have all of that, Marsh said. You have my word. What happened next moved through the system faster than anyone expected. The video from the dog walker's phone was posted to social media that evening. By morning, it had 3 million views. By the end of the week, it had been featured on national news. The footage was damning, a calm, dignified man sitting on a bench, reading a book, being confronted and arrested by an aggressive officer who refused to verify even basic facts before making an arrest. The phrase that caught fire on social media was simple and devastating, reading while black. Three words that captured the absurdity, the injustice, and the exhausting reality of being viewed as suspicious for existing in public spaces while black. 3 words that thousands of people shared, commented on, and used to tell their own stories of similar encounters. 3 words that transformed one man's lunch break into a national conversation. The Lincoln Police Department's Internal Affairs Division launched a formal investigation. What they found was worse than Lieutenant Marsh had suggested. Parker hadn't just demonstrated bias in his arrests, he had actively targeted black men in spaces of leisure and recreation. Parks, coffee shops, bookstores, library parking lots. Places where people went to relax, to read, to exist peacefully. He had turned those spaces into hunting grounds. When investigators reopened previous cases, they found 14 other incidents that Parker had either handled improperly or failed to document accurately. Some of those cases involved complaints that had been filed and mysteriously dismissed. Some involved stops that Parker had recorded as warnings, but that witnesses remembered as harassment. The pattern was undeniable. The city's police union reviewed the evidence and declined to provide representation. In a terse statement, a union spokesperson said, "After reviewing the video evidence and investigative findings, we have determined that Officer Parker's actions were indefensible under department policy and professional standards." That was the end of Justin Parker's law enforcement career. Do you think $2.9 million was enough? What would real accountability look like? Drop it in the comments. He was terminated with cause, his personnel file marked with violations including unlawful arrest, racial profiling, failure to follow department protocol, abuse of authority, and conduct unbecoming an officer. His appeals were denied at every level, first by the department's review board, then by the city's Civil Service Commission, then by an independent arbitrator. He applied to 3 other police departments in neighboring counties and was rejected by all 3. He applied for private security positions and was turned down. He eventually relocated to another state entirely. 6 months after the arrest, Parker gave one interview to a local journalist. Near the end, the journalist asked him a simple, direct question: what specific suspicious behavior did Robert Johnson engage in that justified your approach? Parker stared at the camera. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked down at his hands. He never answered the question. Meanwhile, the civil rights lawsuit filed by Robert Johnson moved forward. The city offered a settlement rather than go to trial, $2.9 million, paid from the city's liability insurance fund. The settlement included no admission of wrongdoing from the city itself, but it included something more valuable: a commitment to comprehensive reforms. New policies requiring officers to document the specific, articulable reasons for any detention. New oversight mechanisms for reviewing patterns of stops and arrests. New training focused on implicit bias and de-escalation. And a requirement that the footage from Robert's arrest be used as a training tool for every officer in the department. Robert accepted the settlement. Then he donated the entire $2.9 million. The money was divided among organizations working on criminal justice reform, legal aid for individuals who couldn't afford representation, and scholarships for veterans pursuing education. In his statement announcing the donations, Robert said, "I don't need the money. I need the system to change. I need other people who don't have my credentials, my position, my resources to be protected from what happened to me. I had 22 years of military service, combat medals, and a respected position in my community, and I was still treated as suspicious for sitting in a park. Think about everyone who doesn't have those advantages. Everyone who gets stopped based on assumptions. Everyone who doesn't have the knowledge or resources to fight back. That's why I pushed for the footage to be made public, so this could become a teaching moment." One of the men who had previously filed a complaint against Parker reached out to Robert after the settlement was announced. They met for coffee, and afterward, the man told a reporter, "He saved my life. Not just because he stopped Parker from hurting more people, but because he showed me that we could fight back, that we could win, that we didn't have to be afraid anymore." Robert Johnson didn't just stand up for himself. He stood up for all of us. What happened to Robert Johnson wasn't unique. It was just documented. Thousands of Black Americans experience similar encounters every day: stopped, questioned, detained, arrested for behavior that wouldn't raise an eyebrow if they were white. The difference was that Robert had the knowledge to assert his rights, the composure to remain calm, the witnesses who recorded everything, and the resources to pursue justice. Most people don't have all of those things. That's why Parker felt comfortable arresting him. That's why officers like Parker continue to target people in parks, in stores, in their cars, in their homes. Robert Johnson's story shows that even when you have every advantage, military service, professional credentials, community standing, bias can still find you. But it also shows that accountability is possible. Justice is possible. Change is possible. But only if we demand it. Only if we document it. Only if we refuse to accept that reading while Black should ever be treated as a crime. Robert still sits on that bench in Lincoln Park every Tuesday during his lunch break, weather permitting. He still brings a book. Sometimes people recognize him and stop to say thank you. Sometimes students from his JROTC program walk by and wave. And sometimes he's just a man in his 50s, sitting in the sun, turning pages, existing peacefully in a public space. The way it should have been from the start. Robert Johnson wasn't special. He wasn't a lawyer or a federal agent or someone with inside knowledge. He was just a teacher and a veteran who knew his rights, stayed calm, and insisted on documentation. Any person can do what he did. Here's how. Know your rights. You're allowed to be in public spaces. You're allowed to ask for an officer's name and badge number. You're allowed to ask why you're being detained. Stay calm. Aggression gives them an excuse. Composure gives you power. Record everything. If you're a witness, take out your phone. If you're the subject, tell them you're recording. Documentation is protection. Ask for a supervisor. If something feels wrong, ask for someone higher up the chain. Repeat the request clearly. Don't consent to searches. Say clearly, "I do not consent to any searches." They may search anyway, but you've established your position. You have rights. Use them. Document them. Defend them. If this story opened your eyes or taught you something important, make sure you're subscribed for more stories like this. Share this with someone who needs to know they have the right to exist in public spaces without being treated like a suspect.